So as people come in, maybe you could just push over this way because people will walk in and it's going to be, the room is set up a little bit so that you can kind of fill the seats this direction first. But we got lots of things to do. I'm Rob Pasick. I was telling Joan that she's so famous that she's just known as Joan. So, Beyonce, Joan.
Madonna, Joan.
Yeah.
I mean.
And so people have asked me a lot about my cast and what's happening.
Yeah.
And I want to bring up my friend Ron here, who's at fault here, and he'll explain what happened to my foot. Go ahead, Ron Ranke, he's from Carhartt. I was wearing a Carhartt cap when this happened.
Yeah. So I'm taking a lot of heat this morning for what's happened to Rob's foot. And he wanted to try something new. We went skateboarding across the street at the Ann Arbor skate park. As with everything, Rob could not keep it at the surface level. I was fine rolling, all right? He had to go deeper into the pool. So as a result, we are in cast. All right.
What was that called? A Mick?
It was a Mick twist. Was the official title of what he was attempting to do.
Can you describe this?
Yeah. So what it actually is it's a flip on a skateboard, but with a 360. All right.
So I got 280, right?
Yeah, you got about 280. You know, we were close, and it was at one point where it's like he might. In my head, I'm like, he's not gonna make. He's gonna make it. No, you know, his toe got snagged up a little bit, an oversight, but nonetheless, we have taken him to the hospital. We've got him in his cast, and he's with us today, people. All right.
So the lesson from that is, don't go too fast when you're learning something new.
Very good.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
True story.
And we're sticking with it, right? Yeah, that's good. It's on video now, and I want to thank. We have a new videographer today, Bill Hall. Can you say hi, Bill?
Hi, Bill.
Bill is taking Roger's place today because Roger's on a nice trip to California, where he's learning skateboarding as well.
He's catching fire, guys.
And Ron, is anybody out there interested in getting some other lessons from Ron for the skateboarding? If you're ready, this is the time to sign up because you're. How's your insurance, by the way? Not too. It's going all right. Good. Anyway, lots of exciting things. Jane is a good buddy, and Monica, and we're really excited about compassion in the workplace. But first, we have a few announcements, and we want to thank our hosts. And one of our hosts is Zingerman's. Zingerman's provides.
Probably couldn't guess.
Ari, who I've known for 35 years because that's when they opened Zingerman's, and I walked into this deli and say, finally, a Jewish deli in Ann Arbor, and got to know Ari then and has worked with him ever since. And so, Ari, you got a few announcements for us.
I do, since y'all can hear. Can you see me? No, Rob wanted me to just announce we have two big fundraisers coming up, so we would love support, help, give tickets as gifts. Come yourselves. First, we have Camp Bacon, which is our 8th annual. It's a fundraiser for Southern Foodways Alliance, which is a fabulous organization that's about food, but also about culture and really about bringing people from all walks of life together. So it's actually particularly important, in my opinion, this year, because it's moving this way when that stuff's moving this other way. So we would love to have you. You don't need to eat meat. You've all read murder mysteries, I get. I'll bet. Even if you didn't kill anybody, you can come to Camp Bacon and not eat pork. So we have a film festival on Wednesday night, May 31st. The woman who makes some of the films from Southern Foodways is coming up. All the films this year are about women in food, and she's going to talk about her work. And then the main event is Saturday, June 3rd. We have an amazing lineup of people coming from all over the place, including Clark Lachelle, who's driving 1,300 miles from Avayels Parish in Louisiana to Cochon-Olay, which is this open pit, open wood-fired style of whole hog that they do, and Simon Setti, who's an amazing journalist who's flying in from Rome. So that will be great. And then I just want to mention Jay Sandweiss is speaking on laughter and health. A week this coming Wednesday at Zaintrine. If you like this talk, you will like his talk. And then on Sunday, June 11th, is Food Gathers Grilling, which y'all know about, but don't forget to buy your tickets. I'm out of the way.
And are
Go
you,
take notes.
folks-
There's info on all of them right here.
All these tickets available here, or?
We will make it possible for you to buy any ticket to any.
All right, one other thing I want
Yeah.
to ask you about. What do you got cooking up for the anniversary?
Well, I'm not the expert because I don't actually like parties and I'm an introvert, but we have a really good work group that's working on all sorts of activities to make it a really great celebration. But the main thing is there's going to be a big street fair in August. We would have done it in March during the actual anniversary, but it's not a good time in Michigan for a street fair.
All right, well, thank you to Zingerman's for all you do.
Thank you, guys.
And
Thank
Ari.
you. It's a group effort. We don't exist without everybody here.
A
So.
couple of other announcements. Jackie, come on up. Jackie, you're going to tell us about Bank of Ann Arbor, but maybe you could also tell us a bit about the music scene. Jackie's the happening person in town here, right?
Good morning. No one told me that I was going to have to follow Ari, so that's kind of a tough spot. But good morning. My name's Jackie Jenkins. I'm part of the Trust and Investment Management Group at Bank of Ann Arbor. I'm a regular here, so I recognize a lot of you. Bank of Ann Arbor's 10th anniversary Sonic Lunch lineup has been announced. June is a really strong month for us. Kicking off June 1 is Laith Al-Seti. So Thursdays in Liberty Park. If you don't know, Bank of Ann Arbor partners with 1071 to put on a free music concert series. So June 1 is Laith. June 8th is LP. June 15th is Tuxedo featuring Ann Arbor's own Mayor Hawthorne. And then June 22nd is the Accidentals, that group from up north that has that great Michigan song. So hope to see you out in the park for Sonic Lunch. Oh,
And
I've got
Bank of Ann Arbor, right?
yeah, and I've got our hot off the presses Sonic Lunch button, so maybe on your way out you'll pick up a Sonic Lunch button.
And could you also, you're giving away today some free tickets to Sonic Lunch, right?
Yes.
Yes.
For everyone in the room.
So, for everyone. You are generous, yes. Great. Thank you very much.
Everyone can come for free.
Just say that you know Jackie Jenkins and wink with your right eye. You got it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
And then we have Chris Singh, who's not wearing her leather jacket today. She was here last month with Lloyd Carr and Warren Manuel, and came with her leather jacket. You might tell that story. That was a cool story.
Yeah, I am, and actually we had a couple other, do we have any jacket gals in the audience today? We don't, but I'm part of the proud first 20 years of varsity women athletes at the University of Michigan. So we had a very cool tradition. Warren Manuel bought us our rightful leather jackets that we didn't get the first time. That's just been awesome. So yeah, I'm still on a high for them. That was great. Now, no one told me I had to follow the great Jackie Jenkins. So
Who had to follow the great Ari.
exactly. Tough.
We had to
So
follow the great
let's
Rob.
wrap it up here. So I am with Raymond, a regional financial services firm. We have a wonderful, thriving office here in Ann Arbor. I'm joined by two of my partners, Debbie Crone and Adam. Thank you guys for getting up early. Very proud to sponsor this event with our friends at Bank of Ann Arbor. This is unique. This is one of the few events I get up early in the morning for. I just love the variety of people that Rob puts together as well as the speakers. Jane, I'm delighted to hear you. I have an MBA from 2002, and I have attended the Positive Business Conference, and heard Ari speak there too, and it was awesome. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thank you. And we also have every month a nonprofit that we promote, because we don't charge for this event thanks to our sponsors, but we do ask you to think about donating to these different nonprofits. And today we have one. Come on up, Kate and Jackie. Come on up, Carolyn. Yeah, I'm going to be surrounded by folks from Camp Algonquin and the Ann Arbor Walk. And in a minute, Kate will describe the cause, which is called Carrie's Cabin. And Carrie Holmes, anybody know Carrie Holmes in the group? A few people must know Carrie. But Carrie was an extremely dedicated camper. She was your counselor, is that correct? Yeah. And then she became a counselor and co-director at Camp Algonquin, and unfortunately was discovered to have cancer in her late 20s, and survived for 7 years, continued to work at camps, and the people at camp all love Carrie. As a matter of fact, Laith Meyer Hawthorne, all were Carrie's friends. And Carrie is just one of those extremely lovable people that everybody thought she was their best friend, and she probably was to many of those people. So Camp Algonquin is a place that is just tremendous for the youth of wherever they come from. A lot of them come from Ann Arbor. And so actually my son Dan and a couple other people have put together an effort to raise money to build a new cabin at Camp Algonquin that is dedicated to Carrie. I got through all that without crying. That's pretty good. So I'll miss her. She's been gone for 4 years. So I'm going to let Kate tell you about it. And Kate, maybe you could also introduce us to Carolyn.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. Kate Milne. I recently moved back to Ann Arbor. Born and raised here, but left when I was 18 to go to Boulder, Colorado, and pursue college and software and a bunch of other stuff. But recently decided to pivot my life and come back here. And through that, pursue some passion projects, and one of them being Camp Algonquin. Carolyn here, she is new to the Ann Arbor Y world.
New to Ann Arbor.
New to Ann Arbor. Less than 2 weeks, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're throwing her into this, and I said, I think there's going to be a lot of really important people here.
Yes, I'm so glad to meet all of you, and I hope to connect with each of you. And if you have any tips about places I should check out in Ann Arbor, please let me know. So I'm excited to start.
Yeah, where's the best place to eat?
Yeah, I missed it. So the reason that I'm here and that Rob had me here is I've been working with his son Dan on the Carrie campaign, and it's part of the Ann Arbor YMCA and Camp Algonquin's capital campaign that they're embarking on, a $2 million campaign to ensure an endowment so that it's always a part of the Ann Arbor Y community, the camp itself, as well as rebuilding a lot of the buildings. It's been there since the 20s, and so a lot of the cabins are kind of falling apart and, deserve to be built up so that it can be there for generations to come. So Carrie in particular, Carrie was a unique individual. She touched a lot of people in ways that it's hard to explain her influence on not only the camp community, but far beyond that. For me, she was my ultimate role model, my mentor, someone who immediately believed in me and made me feel like I could do anything, and that I was a strong girl from age 9 on. From there, she taught me a lot about what it was to be authentic and what it was to put your heart and soul into your work. And, if ever there was someone who was taken too soon, it was her. I'm trying not to cry.
Yeah, you did.
So what we wanted to do is make sure that generations to come will remember her legacy. And Camp Algonquin, if you don't know it, it's one of the most amazing places, my favorite place on earth. It makes every child feel like they're important and accepted. And so, yeah, what we want to do here with this campaign is make sure this legacy is left behind. So, believe it or not, to build a brand new cabin, it's $52,000. And we have started to put together different events, and Rob was so kind to bring us into this mix here. So if this is something that speaks to you, we would love to have your contribution.
How do they do that?
And how you do that is, I actually made a little printout. We do have some pledge cards here, which we can leave up or pass them out.
Sure, there's not quite enough for everyone, but if you are interested, please take one. And if we run out, reach out to me. I can give you my card. You can sign a pledge for multiple years, so if it's something that you're interested in spreading out over time, then by all means, we would love that as well. So.
Yeah, and I did make just a printout with the web address for donations online, as well as the fact that you can make checks payable.
Where do they go online?
Yeah, so I will make sure to put this up at the front. but if you do, it's fairly easy. Sorry, just grab it here. So it's just AnnArborYMCA.org/give, and you'll see that you can choose capital campaign, but there's a place where you want to write in for Carrie's cabin, basically the memo there. And so that way, we know that it will go to this cabin so that we can go up there and have a place to cherish her memory and what she did for the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Carolyn. And yes.
Where is it located?
Camp Algonquin is it's up by it's the town. It's near Berkeley.
Yeah, I should have said that.
Yeah.
Indian River, Michigan, about 4 hours
And the
away.
camp is amazing. I have 2 sons that went there, and they're now, one's 40, one's in their 30s. Their best friends, the people they hang with now, are those kids they met at camp. Not the kids they met in high school, but the kids they met at camp. And so it's an amazing bonding experience. They have a family camp at the end of August, and it's like demand for this for people who want to bring back their kids to the camp. It's great. So my boys are both going to be there with their wives and kids and stuff. So it's just an amazing place. And with all the stress on children these days, I really recommend sending your kids to a camp, any camp, but that's a particularly good one. A couple of other people I just wanted to point out. We have some really interesting people in the audience. Dee, can you stand up? It's Dee Eddington, and I think in terms of compassion in the workplace, you all know Dee. Dee is one of the founders of what I think of as workplace wellness, correct, Dee? And he's been come on over, Dee, I'll introduce you. How many years have you been at the U?
41.
41. And tell a little bit about what you've done over there, just some of the things you've developed.
I came here in research as a biochemist and electron microscopist, and worked with physical education and Fritz and so forth. And we went through and eventually were taken out of education into our own unit. And now it's a school of kinesiology and doing quite well. I retired as dean in 1998 and stayed doing research until 2013. We had 2 million people at our computer over a long period of time. We looked at people over time and how they changed and what happened to them in terms of we were mainly in the quantitative part, their healthcare costs. But now I'm moving much more into where Jane and what I'm doing. So you have the right field. And I taught in the school business executive education program for several years.
Well, thank you very much for coming. And pioneering the field. And one other announcement, I think, I hope I'm not missing it, but Joan doesn't have a last name. She's just like Beyonce, Joan, right? That's her. And Joan's got a kind of a special ask for us today. So, yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, Mim and I have been doing pro bono work with the Washtenaw Refugee Group. And because we're in human resources, we've been doing career counseling with them and helping them put resumes together. And we met a very dynamic young man this week that I'm hoping some of you can help. He was a studio manager for a Kabul, Afghanistan TV station. And unfortunately, he was targeted by the Taliban and had to flee the country. He had to live in Sri Lanka with his wife and young daughter for 2 years and 7 months while he went through the very extensive U.S. vetting process. So he has been fully vetted and ready to work. He has a lot of talents. He knows all about lights, sound, camera. He's willing to do just about anything. They brought the family over here. He's working right now at the Myers gas station, which is really underutilization for this very talented young man. And he only makes about $10 an hour there. He's been promoted several times since he's been there because he's really a hard worker and willing to do things. But one of the tricky things is when they fly people, refugees, to this country, it costs about $3,000, and they make them pay it back. So every 2 weeks, he has to pay $81 towards that airfare back, which if you're only making $10 an hour, you can kind of see how that's hard. So we'd like to find him a job more in his field, in the technical area. So if any of you know of anything, or you just want a really good worker, let us know. Or if you want to donate to the $81 to get him to help pay off this airfare. Our government gives very little support. They only give them money for maybe about a month or so, and they have to get out and work and whatnot. So they need a lot of help. Please, give us your card or anything if you know of anything you can help us on that.
Joan, you should also talk to Bill and Roger because they're part of the video kind of community.
I talked to Bill.
And so that would be a good connection.
They meet or MIM.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other refugees in these kind of situations, but they're really hard workers. They want to be good Americans, and I think we can help them.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring my forgive everybody that I promised to speak. I think that's fine. So Jane, come on up, and Monica. You guys need some stools, or do you want to just stand, Jane? We can get a couple bar stools for you.
I'm used to standing.
All right. And Jane Dutton, I'm going to introduce, and then Jane is going to introduce Monica, who I know as a student, but I haven't talked to in a few years. So Jane and I know our friendship goes back probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And Jane has just officially retired from June 1st. Yay, all right. But as you know, for Jane, that doesn't mean she stopped. I mean, she's just not going to be tied down by some of those requirements, and you can do what you love a little bit more, which is what you've been teaching. So Jane and I guess where we got really close was in 2001, September 11th. And at that time, I went to New York at the call of a friend of mine, Phil Lynch, who was the CEO of Reuters. And Phil had been here in part of Exec Ed, where I was teaching at the university, at the business school. And Phil, they had lost they originally were missing 20 people, and then eventually they lost 7 in the attack. And I went there kind of not knowing what I was doing in terms of relief work. And every morning I would call Jane, and she would kind of help me compassionately, and we both helped me kind of figure out what to do with that day. And I started to report to Jane. And then we got this idea of maybe writing up in real time a case study of what was happening about how Reuters was dealing with this, and not only with the loss of its people, but they were vital to getting the stock market information out and keeping the news flowing. If you remember that week, everything shut down. So Jane came out with Ron Quinn and was there with me for a couple weeks. I think we went back different times to do the research. And we have now put together with Ryan and I a case study, which is on the University Ross School website about recovery after September 11th. So that's how I know Jane. And Jane is one of the most beloved people at the university. Her students really enjoy her class. As a matter of fact, one of the classes that she developed, I'm now teaching for undergrads, which is managing interpersonal relationships at the next professional level after you leave school. So Jane developed that, and I picked up the mantle on it. And so with that, I just wanted to say thank you for all you've done, all the work you're doing, and thank you for all you're going to do in the future, because I know it's going to be great. And here you go.
Okay. Thank you. The Reuters experience I think is part of what inspired this book. Monica's going to start off in kind of what we want to bring to you, but I got to introduce her. So she was a student at the University of Michigan, got her PhD in organizational psychology, and I had the joy of being on her committee. She wrote this really mind-blowing dissertation on courage at work. She's a beautiful writer. She went off and did the academic thing for a while after she finished, and then she's now just started a company called Enliven Work, which is
hold it real close to you.
Okay, which is about bringing
there you go. Yeah.
courage, compassion, and creativity. There's one other C, right?
Curiosity.
And curiosity to work organizations. She is an organizational researcher like me, and we have been studying compassion at work for about 15 years, I would say. It began when she was a student, and this book is a product of, it's a gift, we hope, to all the people working in organizations that we learn so much from in terms of compassion and the absence of compassion. So we wrote this book, Awakening Compassion at Work, very much with an organizational lens, and sort of as opposed to just putting the burden on the individuals, for you to be more compassionate, it's partly about how do we create the conditions that awaken compassion more collectively. So that was sort of the challenge. And I'm going to let Monica start out, and then we're going to do a little dancing back and forth and get you involved. But mostly it's about whetting your appetite for thinking more about this and for engaging all of us in awakening this beautiful human force that I think is needed more now than ever. So I'm going to give it to Monica.
Thank you, Jane. I have to say, being with Jane and Rob this morning is making me feel really young because they're still thinking of me as a student, which I haven't been for a while now. And I'm sorry to say, Jane, that the work is a little bit closer to 20 than 15 years because we were already doing it when you and Rob started writing the Wonders case.
Okay.
So all of that is by way of saying that part of writing this book was really to distill 15 years of academic research on compassion at work into one place where it was more usable and more practical and more accessible to people. And so part of how we write about leadership and compassion that we're going to share with you today is thinking of leading for compassion in two ways. One that would be very familiar from what's already happened this morning is we call leading with compassion. But being so willing to step up to the microphone and tell Carrie's story that you could cry in front of a group of people that you may or may not know, but your heart is so moved, and the force with which you believe in what you're doing to preserve that compassionate legacy is so present for you that you're willing to be open and vulnerable and beautiful in front of another group of human beings. That is leading with compassion in action. We just witnessed it. The other dimension that we talk about that's a little bit more abstract but really important is we call leading for compassion, by which we mean how do you change the conditions inside your organization to make it more likely that everyone feels that it's appropriate and that they are capable of acting with compassion. So how do we change the social architecture for refugee families right across the city or the country so that it's more possible for more people to be more successful in leading productive lives, whatever background that they come from. So I feel like usually we want to start with a story of compassion at work, but this morning we don't have to because we already had two amazing demonstrations of awakening compassion. So that's how we know that we're in a room full of what we call compassion architects. So if you think of the way that an organization structures our social life for compassion, we call that the social architecture. And the people who work with that to try to change it and awaken compassion, in the book we refer to as compassion architects. And so part of our hope today is, in addition to giving you some ammunition about why compassion matters, it's to leave you with a blueprint as a compassion architect about things that you can do. So I'm just going to give you a couple of reasons that you might care about compassion. And the first is a couple of questions that motivated this book at a very fundamental level. And the first question has to do with the fact that most of us spend at least 100,000 hours of our lives working. And we know that in that 100,000 hours we'll accomplish things that we're proud of. But also in that 100,000 hours we'll probably make mistakes. We might do things that we feel regret for. And things that aren't so wonderful will happen in our life. So I use this picture to represent the kinds of losses that happen. This is my dog, Amaya. She was the apple of my eye, and I lost her last year. And that kind of a loss, as unrelated to work as it might seem, is the kind of thing that symbolically happens to everyone in their working life. Right? They lose something or someone that they love. They lose a relationship that matters to them. They lose their health. Whatever that suffering might be, it suffuses our lives and our work over that 100,000 hours. So one motivator for our book is, why do we persist in creating a myth of an emotionless, inhuman work environment when we know very clearly that work is suffused with joy and accomplishment and pride, and it's also suffused with pain and incivility and suffering of various kinds. And that is a huge motivator of all of our work, that question. The other question that motivates our work and that really has us thinking a lot now about this topic of compassion, it relates to the idea that when you ask Americans if they have at least one person they could turn to in times of trouble in their lives, 50% of them say no. In broad-scale survey research, half of Americans say they don't have one person in their lives that they feel close enough or comfortable enough with that they could turn to them in a time of need. And this kind of widespread, pervasive suffering isn't just about loneliness, although loneliness and isolation is very costly in our society, but burnout across every profession is rising. And it's at epidemic levels in high-demand professions. Over 60% of physicians today, when you ask them if they would do it over again, say they would not choose medicine as a career. And even among electricians, the rate of burnout is over 50%. So it doesn't actually matter what kind of profession or occupation you're in. We're living in a society of high technology, high demand, always on, escalating demands and deadlines and workloads that seems to also be driving with it a great deal of suffering. And when we look across these kinds of suffering in the work environment, too often it's not the case that we think workplaces are responsible for wellness, right? Dee's work is pioneering work that's just now starting to resonate with a lot of workplaces. So another question that motivates our work is, what is the role of work organizations and how can they more responsibly step into the role of addressing the vast amount of suffering that's coloring our society today? So an answer, of course, that we would propose is that to awaken more compassion in our work environments helps us address more of the personal suffering that's there, but also awakens organization to their responsibility to distribute compassion in their work communities. And again, we're among compassion architects who are doing that right here in the Ann Arbor area. And in the second chapter of the book, we summarize all of the state-of-the-art evidence about why business leaders might care about compassion from a strategic point of view. And this is a little hard to read, so I'm going to show it to you this way. The darker colored bars on the graph represent work environments where people say there's more compassion in their work. And the lighter shade bars represent lower levels of compassion as scored within the organization. And this is not any one summary. This is actually a distillation of multiple kinds of evidence. But there is solid evidence in the research literature to link more compassion in work environments with more resilient profitability after a downturn, with more innovation if your organization competes on being innovative in its space, with an easier time recruiting employees and more retention and commitment of those employees over the long term, with better managerial relationships, which is a huge part of creating employees' quality of work life, with more adaptability to change, and with higher levels of both employee engagement and customer engagement. So any one of those things can be a huge strategic initiative for a business leader. And when you look across all of these areas of strategic concern in today's organizations, we think that there's a solid case, right? If you need more than the case of humanity and human beings, which we might not need more of, but if you do need a business case, if you need to make the business case to somebody else in your organization to justify a compassion initiative, part of what we do here is try to give you the evidence that you can use to convince other people that compassion matters in your work environment. I'm going to pass the baton to Jane, and she's going to do some work about this idea of leading with compassion and role modeling it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm very mindful. I'm very mindful that we're talking very businessy, but you just have to, being in a business school, that's where we oftentimes can't even talk about this without making the business case first, which is kind of a sad statement, in some ways. But it's partly the reality. So we want to talk about this first take on leading with compassion. And to do it, I'm going to talk to you about compassion as a 4-part process. So I have an appointment in psychology, so I also wear a psychology hat. And if I were a pure psychologist, I would talk about compassion as just a feeling. But as an organizational researcher, I am studying this for 20 years, I have a very different take, that it's much more than feeling, that compassion involves noticing suffering, it involves interpreting suffering as relevant and worthy of care. It involves feeling concern for the other's well-being. This is what psychologists focus on. And it involves acting to alleviate the suffering in some ways. Sometimes that acting can be very small. It can be something like sitting with a person or just listening, to a person tell their story. But the important point is that whatever a person is doing, it has the intention to alleviate suffering. Now, we think this 4-part process is really helpful to us in thinking about both what facilitates us leading with compassion, as well as what blocks leading with compassion. Because a breakdown kind of in any of these 4 aspects of the process of being compassionate can thwart or repress the amounts of compassionate action. So to get you sort of working with this, we'd like you to turn to a partner or in a trio and actually try to think of a story in which, in your workplace or some organization in which you're a part, where you observed suffering and tell the story of what happened after the suffering was observed or noticed. What kinds of things did people and the organization do or not do? What difference did it make? So after you share the story, we're going to try to distill out and talk for a bit about what are some of the impacts of compassion at work, or the absence of compassion at work. But hopefully you won't have too hard of a time coming up with a story, but we want to give you some time to work with the stories because they're meaningful in and of themselves even before we analyze it. Just to be able to tell the story is important. So please, I'm going to have a bell, and I'm going to give you about 6 minutes to sort of think, share stories, and then we'll come back and talk about them. By the way, when we run workshops that are much longer than this one, this time we give a lot of time, but this, just doing this, having people share these stories, oftentimes gives you enough seed, enough insight that could fill a whole day. So I apologize for breaking you up, but I hope, in fact, that we're going to go through the day filled up a little bit by these stories, your own as well as others. But let's process it a little bit. So what are some observations you would make about leading with compassion based on your stories? What observations would you like to share? Yeah, what?
We were talking about the difference between a compassionate problem with mental health as opposed to physical health. And then I brought in a story that was about males as, compared to females. Like, is the compassion, maybe this is something we can talk about, different between men as opposed to, I think women exercise that sort of muscle more. So those are the observations.
Well, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but
sure. I can talk about research-wise, but
yeah, go.
Okay, so there is what the research shows is that there is definitely a difference between men and women in terms of how much they resonate to the word compassion and how much they think that concept is relevant to them in their lives. So women resonate more to the word. They're more likely to buy a book called Compassion at Work. They're more likely to sign up for a workshop with that kind of a title. But when research has measured the kind of behaviors that we know are associated with compassion, there is no significant difference across big pools of behavior. So it might take different kinds of forms or look a little bit different in different kinds of demographic groups. But there's a difference in the resonance to the word, but not so much in whether we do it.
Yeah, and I'll just respond to your observation about mental health versus physical health kinds of issues. Again, in work organizations, sometimes some suffering or pain triggers are more legitimate than others. And we have evidence that mental health types of issues, just look at the university, are oftentimes not treated as legitimate as physical health kinds of issues. Which again sort of marks that leadership can make a real difference in terms of sanctioning or legitimating a fuller range of human suffering so that people feel safe to raise it. Great observation. What else would you observe?
Well, Anna, would you help us with, there's so much privacy around mental health, and then we have colleagues that we see suffering. How do we help them and manage that? How do we do that?
That's I think there's so much to say about that, but I think what we're going to hope that you're going to take at least 3 things from our conversation. One is there is a case in terms of the good that compassion does at the organizational and individual level for why we should care. The second case is that thinking about an organization's or an individual's response to suffering depends on being able to notice mental health, interpret it as the person as still worthy, not causing it, feeling empathy and acting. And what I want to make sure we get to is also thinking about how do we till the soil in organizations so it's more likely at the more collective level that people will respond compassionately to mental health. So again, there's so much to do in this. So I affirm your question. What was it? Was it you, Marvin?
So I'm not characters. But one of the issues is that first, you can exercise some compassion, you can initiate that, but a lot of organizations you have people who've been together for a very long time and have a lot of very complicated relationships and complicated feelings about one another, and a lot of competition, and a lot of kind of long-standing battles and so forth. And in my experience, those often are very resistant at times to helping, getting people to be compassionate. And I think often people use control, and part of that control is not acknowledging suffering or belittling suffering.
True.
And so even though we're talking about having good intentions, even trying to promote that, there are these real barriers that make it sticky and hard.
Yes, and I think part of where we wrote the book, in part to help people realize that we've seen a lot of people be very self-condemning about not being compassionate, and we want people partly to understand it's not just about you, it's the setting that you're in that is squelching sometimes that deeply human response that we're born with, which is to turn towards suffering as opposed to away from it. So that's the challenge, is sort of how as a leader do we behave and how do we cultivate conflict where it's more likely that these obstacles are lower. There was a, yeah.
Let me just push back just a bit here.
Okay.
Because I see that I know about compassion and so let me see that. I've also a little hard about.
She had the microphone.
I understand the value and power of compassion. I also have seen, enablement of drama. And, it's not always easy to discern between those two.
I mean, drama versus real suffering.
Yes, yes. And so, so I think you have, you gotta be really solid in where you are in this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Let me just go to, did you want to comment to that?
Oh, well, I just think it's very easy when you hear the word compassion at first to think of it as something that's really nice, that's soft and that's fuzzy and that makes everybody feel good. But in fact, once you just get a little bit under the surface of that, you start to see the complexity of it. You start to see how compassion is different than pity. You start to see how compassion requires tremendous candor. It requires the ability to be very direct. It requires the ability to manage and lead by stepping into the difficult issues instead of avoiding them or letting them fester. And so leading with compassion, when we think of that as the leader embodying compassion, is actually a lifelong learning project. It's so much more complex than you think of if you just think of this as a kind of cotton candy feel-good concept. And that's why I think we can be studying it for 20 years and still be learning so much about how it works and what blocks it in work organizations.
Part of our hope is that the book actually allows people to open more conversations, about what in their workplace and in people's lived experience and their own histories, what is making it more difficult, what's shaping kind of our mindsets when we approach someone who's suffering. I want to go to just give you just a little bit more evidence about why compassion matters.
Are people hearing okay? Yeah, that mic is sensitive. You got to really hold it like your Beyonce, right?
The research also shows, and again, that's our advantage is coming from distilling all this research, that compassion has effect on the actual individual who's suffering. We typically think about that there's less anxiety, it gives them usually more coping resources, greater commitment, they bounce back or have faster recovery. What we also, I don't think, typically think about is what is the impact on the person who's being compassionate at work. And we find that it changes people's sense of who they are. I'm going to give you an example. One of my other students, Adam Grant, and I, when he was here, studied Borders and Borders Foundation. And we studied the impact of the Borders employees giving $1 of pay every week to the foundation. And we found that over time, the interesting thing was, even though people drew very little money ever from that foundation, it had more money than it knew what to do with, people just giving that $1 changed their sense of how compassionate and caring a person is. So if we can be more compassionate in the workplace, it actually it changes who we think we are. People are more satisfied, there's positive emotion, enhanced relationships, but it also affects the people who witness it. So anybody who hears a story about compassion and experiences as authentic, or people who witness it directly, it affects them as well. So there's a lot of positive spillover to experiencing compassion at work. So that ends the part on leading with compassion. And I'm going to let Monica take you to the last sort of big point we want you to have, again, sharing from what we know about the research.
So it feels like way too fast because there's so many interesting questions we could dive into. But in some ways, leading with compassion is more obvious to leaders like you who chose to come to a breakfast called Compassion at Work. Right? You already know you're a role model. You already know that how you respond to other people's suffering is going to make a difference. In relation to Marvin's question about the stickiness of work relationships, you know that sometimes moments of suffering are breakthrough moments. And then if you as a leader can interpret that suffering as, I know that relationship has been difficult for a long time, and right now it's an opportunity to make some space. Right? That interpretation can actually change people's working relationships over time. But the other thing that leaders do that's a little bit more abstract, but definitely so important, is that they set the stage, they set the architecture within which compassion unfolds. And that creates space for many people to engage in compassion, whether they're in formal leadership roles or not. So we talk about this as the 4 dimensions of compassion that Jane told you about: noticing, interpreting, feeling, and acting, multiplied by 4 dimensions of your organization. And when you put the 2 together, that's how in our research we've shown that people really build competence across their entire organization at being more compassionate. So the organization overall has the capability to respond to suffering in more kinds of ways and more kinds of suffering. And the 4 dimensions that leaders work with to unlock people's compassion across their system have to do, of course, with the values in the organization. And this is where most people think about creating a compassionate culture, and they think about the values and the beliefs about human nature that they want to uphold as leaders, and then they kind of stop there. Right? But the beliefs that we know matter for compassion are the kinds of beliefs that foster what researchers call shared humanity. Right? The kind of beliefs that we're all in it together, that we all have a stake in this, that we're interconnected, that we rely on each other. So when those kinds of beliefs are under assault in our organizations, that's also likely to dampen compassion. But we want you to know that there are things beyond values and beliefs and deep, hard, slow-to-change culture that you can also think about as a leader. So another dimension of how compassion gets awakened at work is who talks to who, right? Who knows who has access to who has access to information through which people. And the more that you can help more people be connected, and the more you can help them be connected in the kinds of ways that Marvin was pointing out that are more human toward each other and more of what Jane calls high-quality connections, right, the more that awakens compassion across your system. So in one of the chapters of the book, we try to show a case of really fast, widespread compassion across a global organization, because we don't have that much imagination, actually, about how compassion can be unleashed across a whole system. But when you look at how it works, it depends very much on networks of people who know each other getting activated in relationship to a cause, right? And the cause can be inside the organization or the cause could be outside the organization. But the more networks that are activated, the more compassion is awakened. The next dimension of the social architecture are the roles, right? How do you define what someone is responsible for and not? So the organization defines this for people when they describe a role, and then people can craft this also for themselves over time. But if we say, right here at Zingerman's, that the person who stands at the front is responsible for managing the seating chart, and they stand at the front and they look at the seating chart the whole time and they're very preoccupied with the chart, it is not within their zone of responsibility to see the human beings walking in the door, to greet them, to get to know the regulars, to make people feel welcomed from the moment that they step in, right? So the way the role is defined can make a huge difference about whether people think that compassion is within their zone of responsibility or not. And then you can encourage people to expand that zone of responsibility if you want to over time. For instance, we worked with some people that were doing an intervention in a transportation system. And there was a lot of violence on the city buses. And there was a deep desire to create more compassion across the transportation system. So the question is, how do you create a more compassionate city transit? And working with the bus drivers and having the bus drivers reimagine their role as creating compassion, the bus drivers themselves came up with a new role definition that instead of driving the bus, which is actually just one task, their role was to create places of refuge that could steward people across the city. And once they defined that as their role, the whole set of tasks that they started to do as bus drivers changed. Right? They got to know the people that rode the bus regularly. They got to know the housing resources in the city because the homeless people that were using the bus to stay warm needed somewhere else to go. They got interested in conflict resolution training because de-escalating conflict on the bus became a part of what was very important to keep it as a place of refuge. So changing the role definition as leaders to incorporate compassion can be a huge intervention that has ramifications across the whole system. And finally, the last aspect of the social architecture that leaders impact in many, many ways, but that can become kind of an invisible script for how people do or don't awaken compassion, has to do with work routines. And this is probably the least common one that people have thought about the least, but actually has the most kind of power to awaken compassion broadly across the system. Because work routines, by definition, are how tasks get accomplished at work. Right? The things that have to recur and that involve many people are routines. And the more you can take any work routine and ask, how could we do it with more compassion? You can actually do the actual work of the organization at the same time that you're doing compassion. Recently, we worked with a healthcare organization that really wanted to create more compassion across their whole system. And what we found when we talked with people about where compassion was lacking was that the most difficult point of the day was the shift change. So people who are going off shift are really, really tired. They've been working hard for 12 hours. People who are coming on are really pissed off that there's a whole bunch of tasks that weren't done on the previous shift and they have to clean up the mess. And the employees were actually quite critical of each other and cruel to each other on the shift change. So we asked, how could you imagine the shift change with compassion? And we had the employees reimagine their shift change routine with more mindfulness, with more compassion for self, for other, and for patient. And then they wrote this up as a group, and they tried it out, and 6 months later, we are measuring that just by this one shift change routine, the nurse quality of satisfaction with their working life is up, the compassion toward patients is up, and the sense of burnout from the day-to-day work is down. So some of those indicators that you would expect to see change if there was more compassion in the work environment are responding just to this one kind of small intervention in how people manage their change of shift. So that's the kind of thing as a leader that you can impact, where if you can change one routine like that happens every day or twice a day across your whole organization, you're creating a huge amount of compassion through leveraging the social architecture. So on your chair or table, you have a little card. And I want to invite you to look at that card for our closing activity. On one side, it says your personal blueprint. And those are questions that relate to the story and the definition that Jane shared with you. Noticing more suffering, interpreting it with more deservingness, feeling more empathy, and taking more kinds of action. But if you turn it over, there's also an organizational blueprint that has a question related to these 4 aspects of the organization. And what we'd like you to do is choose one, either culture, networks, roles, or routines that interests you the most as a leader right now, and share again with your partner why that dimension of the social architecture interests you and what you see as possible for awakening compassion actually in the infrastructure or the social architecture of your organization. So use the organizational blueprint, pick one dimension, and have a few minutes of conversation about it. We'll ring the bell in about 5 minutes. I want to, before we have questions, I just want to let you know that if you're interested in the idea of awakening compassion at work and you want to know what we're up to or sharing more ideas beyond even what was shared in the book, we built a website for the book, awakeningcompassionatwork.com. We're right at the tail end of a campaign called 100 Days of Awakening Compassion, where we've been sharing an idea or a technique for awakening compassion each day for 100 days. There's still about 10 days left, so you can sneak in on the tail end of that if you'd like to receive that or sign up for that. But we will be sharing lots of videos, interviews with compassion architects. There's a place to share a story if you'd like to share a story with us, and we just invite you to join us if you are interested in this topic and would like to be a part of this community. There's a whole community of people all around the world that are very interested in the dire need for compassion on the planet right now.
Thank you, Monica. And Jane, I'm going to do a little bit of my imitation of Terry Grosser. Jane, come on over here, and I'm going to do a little interview with you guys. Yeah, my hero.
It's as close as we're going to get to fresh air.
Does anybody know who? Oh, no, there's a goal. We're putting out to the universe, what can we do to get these women on? Everybody listen to Terry Grosser. Anybody not know Terry Grosser?
We just got rejected for On Being, so if anyone knows Kristen Tippett, we'd love to meet them.
That would be good, too. Yeah. I'm in type vocal, too, so.
That's Jane Street?
Yeah, that's my claim to fame. That I was on Oprah at the time. Everybody asked me. My mother. That really impressed her big time. So let me just start with a question about where did this come from within your experience? Why? I mean, Jane, you're a business school professor, an org psych person. This is not the normal terrain. So where did this, as you look back in your whole history?
Well, I think some people know this story. For me, this was really personal because I had this joint appointment between the business school and psychology, and we had a traumatic thing happen in our family 20 plus years ago. It's ended up okay, but at the time it was quite horrible. And I love the people in psychology, and I love the people in the business school. I mean, this is not an issue of good people. They're good people. But what was so stunning to me was how, from the bottom up, there was this compassion organizing at the business school. It was unexpected, but beautiful. And we really, my husband and I think, healed from that trauma much better from being part of this system. So for me, it was a mystery. Like, what was it? And I'm very happy to say that, flash forward many years later, we published, it's disguised, but we published a story of a theory of compassion organizing. Monica was part of it at the business school. It was a very in-depth study of how the business school responded to 3 students who lost all their stuff in a fire, so it wasn't as traumatic. And we used it to build a theory of what was it, what's in the soil. And so part of this came from an in-depth experience, but it came from a very personal experience of one workplace being healing and one not. And just why was that? Because it was good people, both places.
How about for you?
Well, I grew up in a small town in rural Nevada, and in a small rural town in agricultural country, it was really just a part of the fabric of life that people took care of one another in a deep way. So anytime there was a major loss or a tragedy with a family, it was just expected that you showed up with casseroles and you figured, you started making quilts and you did whatever it took to help or whatever you could to provide comfort. And sort of taking that for granted and expecting the world to be like that was a shock when it wasn't. And that's kind of one of the deep roots of my hunger to help, I think, to spread the ideas that actually how we create human communities makes a great deal of difference in how well we take care of human suffering.
I wanted to also pick up, I thought it was a very important question from Chris Singh about how do we deal with mental health issues. Why is it so difficult to deal with mental health issues in the workplace? And as a psychologist, sometimes I'm called in when somebody dies tragically to try to help. And it's a more enlightened kind of company that would do that. And I also noticed that if the executive group is willing to talk about their own mental health issues or their kids' mental health issues, that's going to open it up. And almost anything else you do, unless it's not, it's one thing to say, it's okay for you to talk about your mental health issues. But of course, I don't have any, so. But if just to mention, so I just wonder if you have any more comments, because I think that was a really key question.
Yeah, I have such strong feelings about this. Because, and if we go back to the social architecture, as an academic, 40 years doing this, I've never had any training at all on students' mental health issues. I've been told to direct students to CAPS if I have mental health issues, but they're coming to me, and if I didn't have children that were struggling with anxiety and depression and had to learn as a parent deeply what mental health issues look like, at least for them, and they've educated me a ton. I am so ill-equipped. My role, is not defined, and I am not enabled to be a good detector of human suffering, where I'm in touch with 200 plus students every year. That's crazy. So roles and also routines. What would it mean if we were evaluating students every year, especially doctoral students, if we did a more holistic developmental process where we ask them, how are you doing? We've had so many doctoral students suffer mental health, especially coming from outside the United States. That seems to be a real issue. So I think those are two examples where this university could really lift up the capacity for compassion if we thought about roles and creatively about roles and routines in ways that would mobilize all of us to be more helpful in this regard.
I just want to add that this is one of the topics we're being asked to talk about a lot right now, and I think it's a perfect example of our leading with and leading for and how they're different. So it's so crucial leading with compassion to open the space and break the silence, and to have leaders at all different kinds of levels becoming comfortable talking about these issues in their own lives and in their own experience. And then to add the leading for component and to begin asking your networks within the organization, how could you activate greater awareness and care for people suffering from anxiety, depression, or other kinds of mental health? How could we reimagine our roles so that we take care of each other in that kind of way? Substance abuse is a huge issue. I know some organizations who are taking their HR partners that are embedded across the organization and giving them huge access to substance abuse awareness, because they become they've redefined their role from HR partner to actually internal social worker, which may not be a language that you like, but it's a way of reimagining the soil of the whole system in our garden metaphor as changing to make these issues not some stigmatized thing that you take care of in your private time, but actually a part of how we build capability as a human work community to work together in more healthy ways.
We're going to open it up for some questions, and Ron's going to be our person on the mic, so please, when you're asked a question, use the mic, hold it real close to your mouth, and so we can capture it, and then we'll let you guys shout out the answers.
I shall deliver the mic to you. Questions? Here we go.
Just say your name, too. So.
Hi, I'm Debbie Marion from SA Coaching. I have two questions. I'm going to just throw them out there since I have the mic. The first one is, I didn't hear you deal with clients. Is the mic on?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't hear you deal with clients at all. So, you have sometimes professionals have a client and you see them briefly and then they're gone. So, but they have situations that you need to be compassionate about. And the second question, which is kind of tied into that, is sometimes there's a clue that you need to be compassionate. For example, someone has an illness, but then there's also a line that you get some feeling that people don't want you to cross. So that the line of being compassionate but not invasive. How to tread that thin line. Thank you.
Okay, well, two quick responses to two subjects that could be long conversations. One about clients. What our research and other people's research shows is that more compassion among the internal members of a system is actually deeply enabling of them to do the client service and client management work that they have to do. And so much of managing and engaging with clients is actually handling pain. So like a huge dimension of service quality is actually compassion toward the pain of clients. And what enables that, right, from the inside of the organization to do that external facing work is more compassion for the people inside. So the compassion toward the client hinges on and is produced in part by the compassion among the coworkers. And the second focus, many times pain in organizations shows up in ways that we have to be able to interpret because they're ambiguous. Somebody comes in late a lot. someone is violating the absence policy. Someone starts missing deadlines, and you don't know why. And so we talk about noticing and interpreting as requiring a lot of inquiry work, and you're describing a kind of sensitivity to how much to ask and when to stop. And I think it's very important when we're talking about compassion, and we're not in nursing school or social work right now, we're talking about in business or work environments. People want to preserve their privacy, sometimes for very good reasons, because they fear ramifications for their employment. And so we never encourage managers and leaders to force someone to reveal something they're not ready to reveal in a work environment. And preserving that privacy and walking that line that you're talking about is a big part of the personal work of leading with compassion.
I think I have to add that I think it's your question and Monica's answer reminds us of the importance of more cross-discipline conversations and mutual learning from each other, because I do believe that professions like social work have so much to teach us about this. I mean, that this is a leadership or it's an all-employee kind of issue. It's about that humanity, sort of working with humanity's suffering is not just the job of social workers or psychologists. It's all of us. So we have a lot to learn from those professions, and I feel like there's not enough cross-fertilization.
One of the very specific things that come up for people is, what do you say when somebody has lost a significant person? And I guess corollary to that, what do you find out when you learn that somebody has a serious illness? And just those words, I mean, you just give us a couple of guidelines of what's okay, and I know there's a lot of what's not okay. Like I know somebody who had that, and they went to this doctor in Himalayas, and let's just start with the loss, because that's the most common. What do you say to people that's okay to say?
I would recommend a book of your friend.
Yeah. So I think the easiest thing for people to say and hear without judgment is, sorry for what you're going through.
Yeah.
You can keep it as simple as that, and then let the conversation unfold where it may, and listen. But I would recommend a book if you're just looking for sort of guidelines around handling these situations from a very wise perspective. A friend of ours, Kelsey Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, just released a book at the same time we did called There Is No Good Card for This. And she herself is a cancer survivor, but she also grew up with a mother with schizophrenia who abandoned her at 12. And she uses her life experience and her deep wisdom of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of people's humbling compassion to give us some wisdom about how to handle different kinds of suffering with more grace.
I'll just also add, I don't know, Cheryl Sandberg and Adam have Grant on this new book, Option B, that's talking about her struggle from losing her husband. And that's, I'm finding that just, I think there is no one right thing.
I think, there's one wrong thing,
to not say anything. And that's what, but I also feel like part of what our research suggests is that sometimes it's not about doing anything or saying anything. It is about being with the other person. It literally is just being with them. And so that just says...
that's a good segue. I'm so glad that you're with us today. And you've just been an inspiration to all of us, and I'm sure we could do this for a day or two and have this conversation. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh wait, we have a free book.
Oh,
okay.
right.
So you are sitting, Shelley, on a chair. So I put little Post-its. We have 3 free books. So you're getting a free book. So you're getting a free book, and you're getting a free book.
I just also want to say, Jane and Marlene, Monica, myself to certain degree, we're involved in starting the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship. You now cause it. Is there a new term for the center, Jane? The term for the center, it's not organizational scholarship anymore. Positive organization. And for those of you that don't know it, should check it out, because in the Ross School, of all places in the university, this place is bringing positive psychology, all kinds of great things, and some of the work you've done grows out of that. And if you want to say,
I just want to say, students are deeply interested in this topic. They, again, whatever world you're in, the young people, I feel like need to know that they can open up conversations about their own suffering and pain and suffering of others.
so you guys are going to sign books next door. So we're going to break up now. They can go next door. I know, how many of you are out there? I know a couple folks. Kate, we're so happy you're back in Ann Arbor. Carolyn, we're glad that you're here, because part of Leaders Connect is building it. And if you have some ideas for Kate about ways that she might be able to find work here, or find what she wants to do in work, I would encourage you to talk to her. Is anybody else out there looking for a job currently? We want to promote people who are maybe in the search. A couple of years ago, about 2008, we had lots of hands going up. It looks like we're doing better now. Anybody in transition now looking for work? Okay. Anybody offering work? I know there's some fast-growing companies out there. Bob, how about you guys? You guys, Bob Royce, you want to say what your company is? Are you growing?
We're growing, but we're not hiring.
Not hiring. What's your company, Bob?
The Understanding Group.
The Understanding. Oh, how about that for a good, Understanding Group. But it's about information architecture. But
we help people create and plan their digital places.
All right. Anybody else have opportunities that they're wanting to let people know about, things that are going on? Bob, Marion of Arbor Research.
We have Arbor Research Collaborative for Health. We're a not-for-profit research organization based here in Ann Arbor. The old Ann Arbor News, now the new building. We are continuing to expand. We have a number of opportunities that are currently available. They're posted on our website, arborresearch.org, and they run the gamut from research analysts to project associates and project coordinators. So if you have smart, energetic, dedicated people who are interested in participating in research to improve patients' lives, please check out the website.
They're doing some great work in a very exciting environment where the old Ann Arbor News is, and you're outgrowing that space. So, yes, anybody else? Yes.
Yes, hi. I'm Dean Soul, Vibrant Life Communities. We have senior living, assisted and memory care throughout the state. We just closed on a property in Ann Arbor, just on the east side of Ann Arbor, Superior Township. We're going to be renovating. It's an empty 80-unit building right now. We'll be renovating and probably opening close to the end of the year. So we're going to be looking for you'll be seeing us, Vibrant Life, in every job from administrator to nurse's aide. We'll be looking for eventually.
And a couple of promotions for me. One is that we're back here in June, and Tom Maloche, who's one of the more interesting people you'll ever meet, is going to be presenting on his new book. And he's writing about ceremony at work, which is another thing that's really important, how it's important to celebrate, to have daily get-togethers. Tom is one of the founders of Venlo Innovations here in Ann Arbor, and will be launching his book at that date. So that'll be very exciting. And also, I'm offering small groups for people. So how many of you in this room have been in one of my small groups? Lots of have. Okay. And not only am I going to be offering it, Marvin Parnes is going to be offering it through my work, and particularly for people who are in transition between that 55 to 95-year-old where you're thinking about getting out of work. We actually have a 90-year-old person in the group. And he's the last one to retire, I think. And then Steve Angerman. Where's Steve? Steve, who you all know as the founder of Running Fit, is going to also launch a group, and he's particularly interested in people who are in kind of the retail space and trying to run a peer support group for them. So if you know folks, we're ready to roll on these, so kind of my expanding services as well. So thank you guys very much for coming, and we'll see you all next month. Please hang out and have more fun.
Thank you.